Well, much, much, much longer ago, it was said that that you left out carrots for Odin's horse as the Norse gods ride across the sky at the solstice.
So is that how Santa starts to fly? Is that where the
Well, we
origins
don't
of
know
that
how
story?
Santa starts to fly. And by the way, the carrots too. I mean, yeah, there's another thing that isn't quite true because carrots didn't come to Europe until much later. But
Of
we'll
course.
move right along again. We don't know why Santa starts to fly and who invented that. In 1840, there's a children's book, an American children's book. And for the first time, Santa is on the roof. And sort of, so he's going to go down the chimney the way we know it. And there are reindeer. And we have no idea how the reindeer got into the story.
So somebody just made it up?
Somebody just made it up, and everyone thought, hey, cool, reindeer.
And I heard even more so that that's how Rudolph got made up. It was somebody wanted to do something where it's like, well, now there's Rudolph. Well, originally there was only so many reindeer, and now there's Rudolph because of a song and because of advertisement in America.
Well, the original reindeer show up in the Clement Clarke Moore poem from the early 19th century, was The Night Before Christmas, Went All Through the House. And if you remember, there's Donder and Blitzen and whatever their names are. Sorry about that. I blanked on their names. But there is no Rudolph.
Right.
And in the 20th century, in the middle of the 20th century, there's a store chain called Montgomery Ward.
Started here in Chicago.
Started there. Of course it did. I'd forgotten about that.
Yeah, and so did Sears.
And they put out a little kids book. Some guy in the Montgomery Ward publicity department writes for their customers this little story, which they publish as a little pamphlet to be given away to customers. And it's the story of Rudolph. It's the story we know. And that's the end of it. I mean, nothing much happens. You know, the customers go, hey, thanks, and wander away and buy or don't buy.
Sure.
But the brother-in-law of this man is a songwriter. And he takes this story and he writes a song called Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer.
Unbelievable.
And it is sung by Gene Autry, the singing cowboy.
Yeah.
And becomes a huge hit, and consequently, the story takes off.
And hence why there's a Rudolph in my yard, right, as we speak. It's about to turn on as the sun sets here in Chicago. Incredible stories. I mean, it's just so mesmerizing how much we think is tradition and customary is just hundreds of stories that have kind of morphed into this time of year. Like, why do you think it happened that way, where it's the time, you know, it's the end of year, is it celebrating, and then people wanting more to celebrate than just that? Because now, you know, then somehow the Catholic Church gets involved and it becomes this big religious thing, at least for Catholics, because I can speak from that point of view, where, you know, you have midnight mass and you have all this. Like, when did the religion aspect come a hold?
Well, the religion aspect is there the whole time, but mostly people think it's an excuse for eating and drinking. The church is always trying to keep up. So what the church is doing is it takes on the elements and incorporates them. I'm not saying this cynically.
I understand.
It's a perfectly valid thing. But for instance, when Christmas trees start to become popular in the 19th century, you very quickly see that Sunday schools begin to have Christmas trees, or the ladies' church auxiliary groups have Christmas tree raffles or charity draws or whatever. So it becomes incorporated into the church.
Almost adapting. Just adapting.
You have this fascinating thing because Christmas carols are a very, very, very late thing. They don't happen until really the 19th century outside of Germany. And what happens is in the 19th century, these songs which have previously been for the people and not considered to be elegant or stylish, something a little bit embarrassing, suddenly they become popular. So you suddenly see ministers or ministers' wives or other people writing religious Christmas carols that previously hadn't been. And you have this fascinating thing happen. Christmas carols in England are only incorporated into church services from about the 1870s, 80s.
Wow.
At which point they tell you they're traditional. And there's a carol service that's given at Cambridge University every year, at King's College, Cambridge every year, which is in England very famous. It's broadcast on the BBC. It only starts at the beginning of the 20th century.
Incredible.
I think it was 6 years, after the first broadcast, the first concert. It had been broadcast on the BBC. The BBC is publicizing it by telling you it had been performed for 500 years.
Just 500 years. Sounds right.
It was when the chapel was built.
Oh, so it
they
was
say they've been singing it as long as the chapel's been there. Well, yeah, either that or 6 years. 5 years, 600, there's not much difference.
Oh my gosh.
I think the thing I like the best in England, they serve Christmas pudding, which is this incredibly dense ball of stuff with dried fruit and a lot of booze in it. Yeah. And I think it's kind of disgusting.
Okay.
And I found before there was Christmas pudding, it was called plum pudding. And before it was called plum pudding, it was called plum soup. And it was liquid.
Oof.
It was kind of a broth.
Okay.
And my favorite thing I think I found was a 18th century Swiss traveler who is writing a book about his travels in England. And he writes about this thing that he discovered called plum soup, or ultimately plum porridge. And he says, if you're not English, you won't like it. And I thought, you bet.
Yeah, right? Oh my gosh. And again, looking at the grand scope of things, what do you feel like? So there's, Charles Dickens wrote about what he wrote about, and that perpetuated Christmas to another level. And then, there's the Rudolph song that brought it to this other level. And then movies in the 50s, 60s, in the 80s, there's, what culture do you think has put Christmas from here and put it up here? Is it collective? Is it English, Americanized? Like what have you just seen, in your opinion, that has really catapulted it?
I don't think I think it is this gradual growth, because it's very interesting. I mean, that there are lots of essays or books about Dickens and Christmas. And I think there is somewhere a book called, The Man Who Invented Christmas. And I actually sat for a month or so with this database of about 250 newspapers, counting the number of times Christmas is mentioned from the 18th century. I mean, who says I don't know how to have a good time?
Right. Yeah. That's a good Saturday night.
Oh, yeah. It was a lot of fun.
With your porridge, your plum porridge.
Right, and you just see this gradual rise. And partly, I think it is as standards of living improve, and as the mass market takes hold, as mass production becomes a thing, so that even people without enormous amounts of money can afford to buy their children toys. You see this change. But what's fascinating is in things like Dickens's A Christmas Carol, which is written in the 1840s, before it really has a grip, there are no toys mentioned. When Scrooge performs at the end, he doesn't buy toys for the children. He
No.
buys food.
Yeah, Big Goose, I think.
Buys a
Yeah.
big goose,
Yeah.
exactly. So, and also that thing that I always loved is he buys it on Christmas Day. The shops are still open.
Right. That's true. Yeah.
Um, so it's a slow thing as it happens, but you get this thing. You get the change that comes with fewer children dying. Child mortality figures improve. So instead of families with 10 children, of whom 4 or 5 might reach adulthood, you have people now who have 2 or 3 children, or maybe 4 or 5. And with luck, they'll all reach adulthood. So you want to invest in them. You want to
Sure.
buy them things. You want to buy them books to improve themselves. You want to buy them toys to make them happy. You have this change that comes. And then, as I say, you can start to afford more toys, even if, say, you're a factory worker.
Mm-hmm.
Gradually, toys become much less expensive. You can afford to buy little Timmy a lead soldier or whatever it is, a toboggan.
Absolutely. And that, I feel like that's where we're at with Christmas now. I mean, here in Chicago, there's a radio station that starts playing Christmas music before Thanksgiving here in the States. And they play it not, and it's the most listened to station every time of year, at this time of year, I should say. #1 station, people listen to it. The Hallmark is 24/7 with Christmas movies. And there's people like me interviewing people like you talking about Christmas. I appreciate your time this afternoon. I know it's the holidays, and I really do appreciate you taking time to chat with me. For people who want to read your work, obviously they can buy your book right here. They can buy it. Where would you like them to purchase if they're going to buy your book, Judith?
A bookstore.
A bookstore. That's what I thought you would say.
Give the bookstore business.
Yeah, you can find it at Anderson's here in Chicago, the bookseller in certain neighborhoods in Chicago. And Judith, if they want to follow you on any social media or websites, why don't you give it out there?
I'm very loud-mouthed on Twitter, Judith Flanders.
Judith Flanders. Thank you very much. And I hope you have a wonderful holiday season celebrating your traditions and whatever they may be.
And you.
Thank you.